Welcome, everyone. This is the Ends Justify the Memes, the show where the lowest of the low, that is the most wretched of wretched and deplorable to end all deplorables, two heterosexual Christian males from the American South, and an Englishman, too. Talk about culture, philosophy, history, health, fitness, and what it means to be an American and a man in the 21st century. I'll be your host, Bill, and this is my producer and co-host, Tank. So lend us your ear and crack open a beer, because the ends always justify the memes. It's not always what it means to be an American. I just threw that in there impromptu. I don't know why, but as always, I have to make that intro screwed up. So guys, we have KizzaGT, our friend, on the show again today, the fine Englishman that he is. And of course, we have Tank, as always, drinking beer for the rest of us, while I consume coffee to brighten up my day. So how is everybody? How was your New Year's? I know Kizza already told us before the stream that he did not have fun New Year's.
No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing I don't have the rights to bear arms, or else I made Christchurch look like child's play.
Oh my God! Fed posting already. Here we go.
Demonetized.
Hey. Hold on. There's an actual Christchurch college in my city. We've got the OG Christchurch here, not the fake one in a certain island that most people can't point to on the map.
Understood.
But alas, sadly, people had to wake me up till 5 o'clock in the bloody morning with fireworks, and I have a beautiful little puppy who gets terrified from fireworks. And it's just like, no. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, this is why in my country they don't allow us to bear arms, because after last night, it would have been like what most people think of Detroit in films.
You're perfectly fine if you stabbed them. I mean, that's pretty common.
Yes, but you see, that means you have to get close.
Yeah, you gotta get close. You have to have a knife. You have to have your stabbing license. It's a whole rigmarole.
Yeah, and sadly, there's too much of that in the capital already. So I don't personally want to add to those statistics.
Speaking of weapons, though, I'm using my stimulus check to buy some guns. So that's gonna be fun.
So you did get your $2,000 in the post.
No, we just got 600. I don't know if it's mine or my wife's, but 600 hit our bank account today.
Oh, really? I'm surprised that got passed. I thought it was going up to 2K.
No, they Trump signed the bill and he wanted them to amend it, and they said, "Screw it, we're not amending anything." He shouldn't have signed the bill, but I also get that some people being mad at him for signing it, but I also get him signing it because some people really need something.
Mm-hmm. I do need a new gun, so
yeah. Well, there's some things I like to get too. If the brace I wanted for my AR pistol was not out of stock constantly, that would be nice. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how much money you have when you want a particular item and it's not available.
Right.
But
excuse you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyways, Tank, you were saying, because we were discussing what we might want to talk about today, because really we're an impromptu show. We just kind of talk about whatever we feel like, and you were talking about language, perhaps, to at least get us kicked off, because I'm sure we'll go down some sort of rabbit trail eventually.
Oh yeah. I kind of, we talked to Yiz. When was it? Wednesday?
Yes, Wednesday.
Everyone's been streaming so much. Yiz has been on, or Kiz has been on like 500 different shows in the last 4 days.
Yeah,
so I'm confused on who talked to who. But yeah. So you guys kind of got into a little back and forth. Because you're both autistic, and so talking about it was really strange for me to be the one in that situation who felt the least autistic. But we're talking about language and how we use and if the language, when we're talking to people outside of this dissident-esque sphere, how our messages, individual messages or whatever, are conveyed. Because you guys kind of got, I forget exactly what the point was, but you guys kind of got caught up debating a specific something.
Well,
I forget what it was.
It's just very pedantic.
Yeah,
yeah. That's what it is. And again, I'm not like crapping on Yiz. I love Yiz, but I think the point I was saying right before the stream, I told you before we even streamed, I might be a little bit off because I was fasting, and apparently I needed a nap because I about an hour or two after I got off stream, I laid down to go to bed, and I slept for like an hour, and I felt great. Or an hour and a half or whatever it was. And, I woke up, but I felt great afterwards. But we were talking about the difference between race and ethnicity. And she was saying that was, well, ethnicity's, a culture thing, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, the word ethnos is where we get the word ethnicity, which is a Greek word. And that was always what race was. They were the same thing. It wasn't until recently that the social sciences, the experts said, oh, no, they're different. And I liken it to the point that John Money decided that gender was something different than it used to always be. Gender has always been related to sex. Mm-hmm. It was essentially the expression of what your sex was, how you acted. Right. And no one really argued or cared. Well, you might say someone's more manly or more feminine, but no one really argued about it like they do today. And that's all postmodernist deconstructionism. And so I guess my only point with Yiz is I don't like the word race generally. It's not that I don't use it, but because I don't think it's specific enough. I think ethnicity is a better metric to use. Mm-hmm. And we kind of got off in the weeds about it. But she was also tired. So given it wasn't, we were both like not the best state of mind either.
But that's something to consider. Getting back to the topic I was talking about, when you use a phrase or terminology or whatever, and people will perceive it different. So it's important to think about like the kind of words we're using. And I remember in the past on a different stream we were talking about the term reactionary. And it's something I use, even though I think it's a stupid term.
Well, sorry to shill and interrupt, but a certain Canadian guy called Dev did a video on this asking what is a reactionary, and let's just say he couldn't get an answer.
Give me 1 second. You guys keep talking. Hold on.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I got you. Yeah. I don't know if I've seen that I like short fat otaku, but I don't know if I've seen that. But Tank and I have talked about this because a reactionary is essentially, in political sense, is someone who's going back to the past. Well, how far back in the past does that mean? Am I a reactionary because I want to have a strictly constitutional style government?
Well, I mean, technically, this whole thing I'm hearing about men wearing dresses, I mean, some would say that's very reactionary because that was a thing many, many years ago.
Yeah,
well, my surname is Scottish, and I have a kilt with my clan colors.
But a kilt's very different, and technically you inherited that from the Irish. So,
shots fired.
I mean, I'm just saying it's a fact. It's a fact. Let me find the video in question I'm talking about.
We culturally appropriated it. Is that what you're saying?
So when I use the term reactionary, the reason why I like it is because to me it differentiates between conservative, like a Reaganite style conservatism. I think of reactionary as someone who is at the very least skeptical of modernity. And that's why I like because the joke I make is that the conservatives want to go back to the 1950s and the reactionaries want to go back to the 1450s. That's the joke. But
I'm just going to post in the chat right now.
Go ahead.
The video. What is a reactionary?
Who was it that did this video? By the way,
short fat otaku.
Oh yeah, I did see this. Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we mentioned before the stream, or I mentioned to you guys, it's really interesting, and this is the importance of language and also sussing out things like. This is why I'm not so exclusive with any particular language. I don't like to necessarily kick out any sort of language, which is why I'll use terms like left and right, even though I do agree that it is authoritarian versus libertarian. And I don't mean, the party sense, or authoritarian versus liberty or freedom. And I say this because people have emotional connotations to the words that they hear. And so many people today, specifically because of our mass propaganda machine, are brainwashed into these connotations, and their cultural background educates them in those connotations. So you might say a word to somebody and they completely think you're saying something else totally different. And this happens all the time. I've noticed this a lot. One of the things that, when I worked in the jail, they would try to teach us was how to de-escalate situations. Now, I'm not saying anybody or everybody was good at that or even dare to try to do that, but generally for me, if I could avoid getting into a fight, that's a lot better than, having to take control of somebody physically, having to write a report, justify why, I did whatever I did and all this stuff that's administrative. So, doesn't mean I would give in either to the inmate. It just means that I would rather de-escalate the situation. And you would find often when you're dealing with certain individuals in that situation who are very strong-headed, not very well educated, a lot of them are lower IQ, that they will take offense to a lot of things that you say when you're not saying anything offensive at all. And that's one of the issues with language. So you have to literally in each and every conversation suss things out, which is also one of the things I was kind of talking about with Yiz is like, I think I get her approach and I think it's useful, but for Yiz, she has an audience. For me, there's only a certain audience I'm probably going to attract. I know that. But we all have our audiences. We have to understand who's an ally, who's not. And I almost hate using that term because it's so much used amongst the left. But like different people are going to have slightly different perspectives and speak about things in the same way. And we shouldn't just put our emotions into what they're saying and really get down and suss out to the core of what they're saying. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that not to show other channels, but V did make a good point on this, where you could have people, quote unquote, speaking the same language, but in reality, they are not.
Well, yeah, happens all the time. I mean, look at where you live, and
yeah. Don't get me. I mean, if I will give the audience and the host here, I will give you 5 simple words that almost nobody knows the actual that the definition has been so skewed to the point where almost nobody understands them. You gotta laugh what the first one is because it refers to a certain topic in my country. Number 1, sovereignty.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Now, I'm sure you two are intelligent enough to tell me what is the definition of sovereignty.
I'm probably not actually.
Way to make me look bad.
So if I had to guess,
yes,
I would say that sovereignty is when you have control over yourself, or an entity has control of itself.
Okay, that's not too far off the official definition. Bill, what do you reckon?
Yeah, my understanding of sovereignty is basically the self-manifestation of your destiny, but often it's applied solely to leadership or nations or groups of people, but that you have control of your own destiny.
Well, okay, you're both pretty on the mark, but the official definition, if I were to dare I say, pull the appeal to authority card here, fallacy here, should I say, to quote the Oxford English Dictionary, it is supreme power or authority.
Okay.
And it refers to a reference to a nation. Now, the idea of sovereignty is an absolute concept. But for some weird reason, somehow in European politics, they seem to have this idea that sovereignty is a liquid concept which can be pulled.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, that's not what sovereignty is. And I hear this lovely speech from a certain German who claimed political asylum in my country many years ago. She said, "Oh, sovereignty in the 21st. What does sovereignty mean in the 21st century?" I'm just like, and she goes on ranting about pooling sovereignty, and I'm just like, Oh, Lord, I wish I was in that parliament. I would have happily ripped on one and say, no, dear, sovereignty, to quote the Oxford English Dictionary, is supreme power and authority over aka supreme power and authority over a nation, aka not taking laws and orders from a foreign government or organization. Now that's perhaps the biggest one in recent times. A second one, which one particular country doesn't seem to understand: independence. I'm sure you two know exactly which country I'm talking about with this one.
Are we talking about Scotland?
Oh, yes, we are. Yes. Apparently, they say they want independence, but what they really want is to remove the middleman of Westminster when it comes to the European question. And it's so blatant. And I just love how people claim they want independence. I'm like, no, you don't. You just want to remove the middleman of Westminster. Like, I can understand. I don't like Westminster myself, but don't call it independence.
Here's a spicy take on that same sort of concept.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like a lot of people, I studied history and international studies in college, and a lot of people didn't really understand what colonialism meant.
Yes.
Because of the Marxist take on it. That's why that's kind of yeah.
So what England did to India is colonialism, but if some institutional power within, say, the United States wants to, I don't know, enforce some specific cultural hegemony onto a different country, that's not colonialism, right? Or the big one, what the Soviet Union did to Ukraine is not colonialism.
Right. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
The Marxists, the whole point of Marxism is to spread their entire religion and philosophy and government across the world. Yet you're the evil imperialist colonialist, and they're not. Okay, well, yeah, but that's the world we live in, where everything has to be, turned upside down. As one of my favorite bands, Radiohead, has a song, "Up is the New Down." That's the world we're living in today. We've been living in for at least, I would say, 20 to 30 years for sure, but it's been growing long before that.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned colonialisms. I just went to my favorite lexicon, as it's lexicon, as it's technically called, as it's also known as, colonialism, the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another nation, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in an ironic sense, you could argue the European Union are somewhat half colonizing the continent of Europe.
Yes,
because they do have partial / fully political control.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, this is perhaps a very spicy take. I say those who don't value sovereignty should be made a slave indefinitely.
That is indeed a spicy take.
Because human rights should not be. To go on with that spicy take, human rights should not be universal. They should be subscription models. Hey, give me the call. You want me on unpopular opinions, because that's a very unpopular opinion.
Yeah, no, that's I think we talked about this in the past. That's the Starship Troopers model of citizenship.
Not quite, but the mentality is basically, you know what? If you don't value something, then you shouldn't fear losing it.
Oh yeah, for sure. But to bring it back, I guess the question I want to pose is, how much does language matter in terms of? I mean, because ultimately the point that a lot of people are here doing is we're trying to raise conversations and raise topics and shine a new light on things outside of the mainstream. So when we use the terms that we use, are they effective? Are they not effective? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Kiz.
I'm just going to say, language is very important, because if you don't know what you're trying to put for it, if you don't have two people speaking the same language, how on earth are they supposed to communicate?
Right.
And even if they are speaking the quote-unquote same language, what they mean can be very different.
Hmm.
So, for example, this the issue which goes on with time. One of the funniest things I do remember finding out: a certain gamer word beginning with F, or as I tell people to call, as I said yesterday, you got to call it a Lancashire meatball.
Right.
Now, those in the chat may know exactly what I'm talking about, but it also meant a bundle of sticks.
Right.
And also, technically speaking, if you take partially an idea from a certain political philosophy from Italy, it can be somewhat taken from the idea of the certain gamer word,
Hmm.
which I did find personally I thought very ironic. So technically speaking, you can call a certain group of people a bunch of FAGGOTS. Let's see if the census picked that.
We have a fascisha or fascii on the back of our dime in the United States, because it was a popular Roman symbol about unity, coming together, and or that bundle of sticks you were talking about. It's like coming together and having strength. You're stronger that way.
Yeah,
And
I mean, me personally, that sounds nice on paper, but I take the engineer's approach. Rather than trying to make a system strong, why not make each individual component stronger, and therefore you end up with a vastly stronger structure, vastly stronger product in question.
I agree with you, Kizza. That's actually pretty much the main message on my channel, all minus one, is that we have to be individually strong units in order to have a strong society in total.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of actually makes me laugh because I remember remembering an interview with one of the members of the Hungarian Parliament when he was speaking to the BBC. When they were asking him, why do you hate the European Union? So no, we don't. It's not that we hate the European Union. We just don't agree with the direction. They're talking about having a strong union. What we want is strong countries to create a strong union, which was quite hilarious.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the European Union was just a matter of having equalizing trade through the euro as it was proposed originally, essentially.
Wow.
I mean,
supposedly.
I know.
I've come across lots of contradictive information to that, especially when people
because you have to understand
Churchill.
that's a byproduct of the UN and all the other globalist organizations who want everyone to be in a global union of governments, like one that has teeth, unlike the UN. The UN doesn't really have any teeth unless the United States goes over and bombs somebody for their sake.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, I think they should hire someone named Alan Snackbar because he has a very explosive personality and temperament.
I'm not aware. Who's that?
Say the name again.
Alan Snackbar.
There we go. He got it. He got it. But alas, I mean, me personally, I'm all favourite with a giant type of globalizer union, providing I am in charge of it, of course.
Well, yeah, that's always nice.
Well, I think that's how just about everyone feels. But yeah, back to the language thing. I mean, this is kind of my only point is like your language is always going to be tailored to who you believe the receiver of the message is. And when you're talking to a large crowd, it's very difficult to tailor that message. That's why one-on-one conversation is so important. It's also why things like Twitter and texting are just ridiculous. When I was a single man, I found out very quickly that texting was just ridiculous when talking to a girl, because she would infer all kinds of things about what I was saying to her based on her ideals of what she thought I was. And so communication is no easy thing. It never, ever has been. People argue today about what the founders meant in the Constitution, even though we have, all kinds of writings and papers. They argue about what, Jesus said in the Bible. They argue about all kinds of things and messages. People today argue about, what Martin Luther King believed, even though it was pretty clear what he believed. And you have people on the left saying that he was a leftist because he wrote a letter to his later on wife that he was sympathetic to socialism. He never said that he was pro-socialism. He said I have sympathies for this idea. That
Yeah, and
doesn't mean you endorse it.
hell, Orwell had sympathy for the frickin' so-called socialists in Spain against Franco, but guess what? He knew the truth.
Well, he fought with the commies though too. He had
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because Orwell itself. This is a good example. Going back to an old video I saw many years ago, Orwell Matters with the late great Christopher Hitchens. I mean, there's a reason why his four most famous, actually 4 or 5, I'd say 5 books he's most famous for. They are notorious. There's a reason why, especially in the Soviet Union, they didn't have those types of books there because they knew full well it would make him. It was a complete danger to them.
Well, and I talked about this. An early video I made on All Minus One was about like cyberpunk genre and how there's a lot of leftists now trying to twist the idea of the cyberpunk genre being about runaway capitalism. And to some extent it is, but it's not runaway capitalism, it's corporatism. It's that the corporations run the governments, they have more power than the governments. That's not capitalism, folks. It's not. Capitalism is simply free trade, free exchange, property rights. That's all capitalism is. And once a corporate entity has more power than an individual legally, that's you're going into a certain field of collectivism. But that's the way they see the world now, and the cyberpunk genres generally, at least in the Western world, in the American sense, is very dystopian because it's basically really weak governments that have fallen apart, and this corporatization of the world, and the individual is just left alone there to be dehumanized and lose their humanity as they slowly get chipped away at with this transhumanism. So, and this is kind of the stuff that when Tank and I talk about technology that you would say futurists have predicted, that's kind of scary, and I also find a bit unethical. But there's this huge twisting of language that is going on that's very strong, that starts with, to my mind, Soviet propaganda. You can go back further. You can look at things a little bit further back, but generally speaking, this was a Soviet tactic. You can read about this. This is countermeasures, or what else is it called?
Active measures. Active measures.
Thank you, Kizza. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a very strong tactic that they've used, and then you get the postmodernists like Derrida, Foucault, and of course there were many others, but they're the only ones that are like intelligible to read at all. and they basically said, oh yeah, language is just a tool of power, it's just a tool of strength. You get someone like Solinsky who's like, keep it simple, because we don't want to get off in the weeds with things. We don't want to over define things. We want to keep things simple, because this is the message. So it's all about like this brainwashing, droning on, and keeping things overly simplistic. And for me, I'd rather sit down and if I need to, just have a very long conversation with somebody and suss it out over time. No, I might get pedantic at some points about certain words, about certain things. But generally I try not to, but I do want to save the origins of our language and what those mean, or what those words mean based on their history. And a lot of English is based in Greek and Latin, the Latin that came over from French, but still Greek and Latin, and is very, very old. It has basically the same kind of, root connotations. And a lot of that's been completely destroyed in the last 60 years.
Yeah, I mean, on the whole language point, I mean, actually, that brings me on to my third word, actually, which really does grind my gears. The word democracy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and my God, I tell you what, I can only count on one hand people who actually know what the actual definition is. And I'm talking what the word translates from, where the word actually comes from. I mean, because generally I like to use like dictionary definitions, but the problem is for certain words like democracy, I go to the so-called original definition.
Mm-hmm.
Because democracy, the word comes from demos, which means a person from a city, state, or province, and kratos, the Greek, the divine inspiration of strength and power. Or for the youngsters or the youngsters potentially watching this, yes, the same Kratos from the God of War franchise, or Dad
Yes.
of War, now known as. So effectively translates to power of the people,
Mhm.
which in a practical sense effectively means tyranny of the majority of the public.
Mhm.
It also
There
means
is
socialism or communism in some form or another, essentially.
not
I mean,
necessarily. It's just whatever the majority wants. Because
well,
effectively,
yes, but historically, it has always been a matter of sharing the goods and keeping keeping the lower classes having enough money and the upper classes from having too much money, instead of allowing people to just be free to pursue their wealth.
yeah. But initially, when the idea was founded, it was founded as a pure counter to aristocracy.
Yes.
Yes. And the problem is now is people are trying to co-opt the term with stuff like parliamentary democracy and stuff like that. I'm just like, parliamentary democracy by definition is an oxymoron.
Well, Tank makes
Because
the point all the time that it's he's like, he's not a fan of democracy and whatever else. And I'm like, but Tank, we don't live in a democracy. We're supposed to live in a republic.
well,
And
yeah, you live in a. I mean, it makes me laugh when I was on a certain the blue bird of social media sites. The amount of times I was, as an Englishman, I was arguing with Americans that you are not a democracy, you're a constitutional republic. Even
I've had
one
that.
person I argued with apparently worked for MSNBC. I'm just like, are you freaking stupid? You are literally a constitutional republic. And I then say to him, okay, find me where within your constitution, sorry, where it says the word democracy. Go ahead, find that. They couldn't find it. I was like, well, there you go. You're also a republic. And I also pointed out, name a democracy which has a Senate and a Congress. And you're going to laugh what they responded with.
What's that?
I'm sure it will.
Republic of Ireland and the Czech Republic. Like,
Yeah,
the clue's in the name.
If they were honest, they would understand that what we really live in the United States is closer to a plutocracy or an oligarchy, and it's supposed to be a republic.
Well, James Burnham in the book The Machiavellians makes the case that democracy, as it's defined, is impossible. The idea that just on a logistics scale, you can't have all of your decisions of country made by the people. So what we do, of course, to get around this contradiction is we elect people who then hire people. So we've got, all these unelected officials in our, democracy, quote unquote, that really run the shit, but they weren't actually elected. The CIA was not elected. The FBI was not elected. All the people that keep case notes on us and what we say, they were not elected.
I mean, this is the issue with, like, it's what makes me laugh about my country regarding the civil service and the monarchy. It's like or should I say the House of Lords? Like, the House of Lords basically have no power, but they're unelected. They're basically selected by partially birthright, among other things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, no wonder people are attracted to that. Because let's be frank here, if you had no accountability for what you said or did, that's going to be a great power vacuum for anyone. And also, as the old saying goes, and this was my point about accountability, and I try to explain this to people, if you make people victims of their ideas, they are less likely to promote said ideas.
Mm-hmm.
How do you mean that? Okay, let's say, for example, I know people who want tax increases, right?
Mm-hmm.
A very simple question. If that same person became a victim and end up having more of their money being taken by taxes, they're going to get very, very angry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, what made you think you was exempt from the tax increase?
Yeah.
Like, are you stupid?
Well, I think most people think they're good people for saying, I want the government to do it for me. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, you're such a right and true loving person, you are.
Yeah.
So righteous. Yeah, and this is why I go back to my point with the idea is that if you were to make everyone live up to their I would say the logical conclusion of their ideologies, you would end up making so many people victims to the point you would effectively red pill an entire planet against these terrible ideas. And like as I explained to people, as I explained yesterday in the stream, what's the best way to learn not to touch a hot oven?
By touching it once.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
because people say, "Oh, you need to stop people from having the mistakes." I'm just like, no, just let them fall.
We parent this way too today, and it's gross to me. It's like you're not. This is why we have at least according to Jonathan Haith or Hythe or however you pronounce his name. This is why you get these children that just can't, when they get out into the world, accept anything, and then they want mommy and daddy to protect them, and they're grown adults, but they're not grown adults. They're just little children inside in adult bodies, going about the world, not able to accept the consequences of their stupid actions.
Well, but there is a term for that. Well, I do remember a few years ago. It's called Peter Pan syndrome.
Right, right.
And I think we need to use that term more often. And because it's something that people will know, culturally speaking. Peter Pan, hey, it's a Disney classic. So that's why this is another aspect of language. We have to sometimes play the game of using those types of terms and language in order to send a message. Which is why I constantly tell people use the word regressive when they're talking about so-called progressives. Because they don't want progress, they want to regress. They want to go backwards.
Yeah, I mean that's very. I see a lot of people doing that. They use the only problem I have with that term is that it's kind of been a lot of like, I would say the more cringy conservatives have kind of used it, like Dave Rubin. It is a good term, but I think it's been a little bit tainted by some of those guys.
Well, the thing was, it wasn't even someone like Dave Rubin put it. It was originally the term was, to my knowledge, the first person to coin the term was Majid Nawaz.
Yeah,
who was
Nawaz was the first one. Yep.
Yeah, who was a former extremist. Because the reason he turned to the regressive left because they're unbelievably guilty of bigotry of low expectations. Like, let's be frank here, bigotry of low expectations is basically the kind version of white supremacy.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that kind of goes back to the language aspect. It's not even necessarily the language that's being used. A lot of times it's who's using the language. Like we hear these terms all the time, like, oh, that's a such and such dog whistle because some guy used it, Richard Spencer, I guess. Of course he voted for Biden, so there's that. But
do you know the origin of dog whistle?
I'd imagine it comes from a whistle that calls dogs.
Well, yeah. But I mean politically.
No, I don't.
It's from the 19
Yeah, I mean, I get where the term comes from. I'm just a little unsure where it specifically comes from.
It comes from Australia, politics in Australia in the 1990s about immigration.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
It has nothing to do with American, and it was appropriated later on by the. You can actually wiki this. There's a decent wiki article about it, and then it was appropriated by the left in America because they were trying to say that a more conservative member, I don't recall exactly who, was saying that immigration, all these other things, may not be the best path for Australia, and they were just being racist. And it was a dog whistle, though he said nothing, racist. And then they like to go on and talk about the famous interview that was anonymous by Lee Atwater, who was a advisor to Nixon, who supposedly said, that in the South in the past, we used to preach, against black people and all that stuff. And all of a sudden we're giving them economic growth. We're giving them industry. We're giving them prosperity. And so, yeah, like you could say that that's like a dog. Well, or they try to make it out. Well, that's a dog whistle. No, that was that the South was very poor in the 1970s still, didn't have a lot of industry. And that's why it started turning red. And it didn't flip red, by the way, until the 1990s. So it took quite a while. But that's also what the left bases the idea of the Southern strategy on, which, folks, does not exist. You cannot prove the Southern strategy. There was one person, Strom Thurmond, who was a former senator in my state here in West Virginia, that flipped. and that was it. And I think before he was a senator here, he was in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. But if you look at who voted for the civil rights bill, all that other stuff, that the Democrats try to dismiss that, displace it, and go, well, no, there was a Southern strategy from the Republicans. Well, yeah, maybe. I think the Southern strategy of the Republicans was, well, we're going to bring industry to the South and make the South a little bit more of a wealthy place than it was in the past. Had nothing to do with race.
Mm-hmm.
But they want to tie anything, of course, of wealth to race, because wealth is bad because they're all Marxists. So, yeah. Anyways,
yeah. It's fun. It's funny how those types are also are not exactly some of the poorest people in the country now, are they? Actually, it's not like the people who complain about this are ever exactly strapped for cash. I mean, actually, I did remember asking somebody this little question before, and I did ask this on the Bluebird on the Bluebird social media platform. Has anyone ever met an actual working class socialist?
Actually, Tank and I have talked about this. We had almost a whole show about this. Yeah, and you're right; it doesn't exist. What's interesting, it's the same with the whole coof epidemic. I noticed the same thing, generally speaking, is that people who still have jobs and whatever, a lot of them are maybe aware that this is kind of like a little crazy. But if you start getting to like really hardcore working class people who aren't able to work because of this, they're going, what are you talking about? Because everyone that I know that I would say is well off in the upper middle class, or say, who is against, or sorry, not against, all for like lockdowns and the destruction of the economy and whatever else, they're not thinking about the lower classes. They're not thinking about them. They're worried about, dying from a virus that kills like hardly anybody. And in fact, we're not even sure. And in a year after we go through all the data of excess deaths, I'm more than certain, based on everything that I've looked at, it's going to be right on par for what we've been for the last decade. It's not anything different. It's not anything greater. Most of these people are dying with it. They get pneumonia. They're dying of pneumonia. If the coof wasn't around, they just would have been classified as a pneumonia death. And we don't talk about it. It's not really a thing in epidemiology, people dying from a common cold, but it's possible, and people do. The reason why is because we classify it as pneumonia, when they get that bad. So Kizza brought up the point, Tank, that there aren't really any working class socialists. So
oh yeah, we've talked about this in the past. It's not a thing, you don't see it, and and I think a lot of it might actually have something to do with language, and this is so to kind of backtrack a little bit. We obviously all know that the left did not, or whatever you want to call it, they did not slip up and trip into being in power. It was an effort, and a lot of this Alinskyite tactic was to make things very simplified. And I think the white pill for us is that they've lost sight of that particular concept, and now everything they say is so over complicated, to the point that I think that's part of the reason why they can't get working class adherence to socialism, is because, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to, like, for instance, my brother's in town, so he works in concrete. They lay concrete foundations for houses. All right, so let's just say this Oberlin University socialist, goes to my brother's job site and he says, "Hey, did you know that your boss is a capitalist who is exploiting your labor and stealing your surplus value that you create in the form of profits, and that the fact that you are making a wage is exploitative to your, being, basically you're being robbed." He's gonna look at them like they're fucking crazy. Like, that does. He's like, and no, in no world does that make sense to me, or to them, I guess you should say. he's like, who? He's like, you're telling my boss, Bill, who, I don't know his actual name, Bill, who takes me fishing on his nice boat. Yeah, like 3 times a year and gives me like all these bonuses for doing a good job. You're telling me he's exploiting my labor and that you're actually my friend and he's my enemy. No, that's not going to happen. So I guess that's in terms of language, I guess that's kind of something that's working in our benefit, is that socialists are not going to pick up a working class coalition if they can't simplify their message. And I don't think they can simplify their message.
You know what's been happening too is that a lot of people, at least since Trump was elected, have gotten aware and have woken up and have walked away from the left, to use Brandon Strzok's terminology, because he created the campaign, the group Walk Away. But they have. There's a ton of folks who are like, this stuff is crazy. And some of it didn't even happen until just this past year, but it continues to happen. I love it. People are waking up. When I was at the New Year's Eve party, I was talking that most of my friends are, whether they're more lefty or not, they're very like-minded in that they want freedom. They want the government out of our lives. Like they would consider themselves more socially left, I would say, but not necessarily politically, as far as, authoritarian or any of that kind of stuff. But it's really interesting that the left is now going to the extreme of saying, well, we need to get 16-year-olds to vote, because that's the only people they can grab, that 16 to 25, maybe 30 bracket, right? Because those are the people that are the least developed. And really, I'm all about raising the voting age, because your prefrontal cortex isn't even fully developed till you're like 25 or 26, 25-ish, 24 maybe. So why are we letting people vote so young? Back in the day, when you had to be a man at 16, 18-year-old, and you had to go off into the world, you might even get married that young. It was something different. Today, people don't have any responsibility, and they continually call for the government to have more responsibility for them. So if they make a mistake, it's the government's responsibility to prop them up. And this is a fundamental principled argument that I have against, say, a welfare state or unemployment or any of that stuff. I get the social safety net. I can agree that okay, maybe it has some potential good, but I think it actually harms society far more than it helps it, because then you get a society that goes, I don't have to help my neighbor. I don't have to help my brother, my sister, my cousin. I don't have to help my mom and dad. Let's just go put them in a nursing home when they get old and not even take care of them. And I think morally, from a perspective of Christianity, it's just horrible. Like, you have a responsibility to your fellow man. And the more and more we put this on the government, the more we obfuscate our responsibilities, and the weaker our society gets, and the more controlled it becomes, the more that we live in a slave society. And really, that's the thing that I'm seeing. But I'm happy that there are more and more people waking up with all this craziness. As my one friend told me, he's like, yeah, he's like, the thing is, he's like, it's always been like this, but at least people are able to be aware of it now. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. I said, I love it. I know I get very black pill pessimistic, but I love that people are waking up. And it's because we have the internet, really, primarily. It's because we can do streams like this, even if we have a small voice and a small audience,
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it's so out there, and then you see these points being pounded out and basically been advertised for effectively, let's say, the last 8 years, where this real intersectional BS has become front and center. But if you ask the average person, they just don't know what the F you're talking about. They're saying, you're crazy. And I'm just like, no, this is what people believe. And you show them the evidence, and they're quite literally dumbfounded by it. They're dumbfounded by it.
Yeah, for sure. But to kind of go back to what Bill's talking about, to put these ideas together, the leftist, college communist message is not going to resonate with your average working class, your guy working construction, your blue collar types. However, it does resonate very well with your barista who has a master's degree and is $75,000 in debt from student loans. That is the proletariat, so to speak, that it does resonate with, and that's why you see this kind of filtration where your guys who are actually manual labor or skilled trades or whatever have never fucking heard of Karl Marx, and your typical college town barista has. But the problem is those guys do end up getting power, the college town baristas, and they do end up working in academia and such, all the non-proletariat jobs, and then they get to make a lot of decisions that affect our children who we send to college. So it's still an issue, even though it's very ironic, it's still an issue that we have to deal with. Maybe in the future we'll see less of that, because I think more and more people are kind of getting black-pilled on the idea of university, which I think is ultimately going to be for the best. And there's not going to be, if you go to your community college for a welding class, you're not going to run into that sort of thing.
Well, thankfully, I didn't when I was at college, because I went to a proper STEM college trained by actual professionals who've been there and done that, from British Aerospace to Renault F1 to ProDrive, etc. Yeah, we had actual trained professionals who, if you try pushing that shit, they would literally take a freaking wooden spoon and slap it right at the center of your cranium.
Right.
Yeah, but that stupid shit will just tell you to fuck off, to put it politely.
You guys in the UK, though, too, you have a different kind of educational system, right? Where you kind of have like a track you can go on based on how you're doing in school or whatever. I know
it's not quite. I mean, you have your standard nursery, then primary school up until, which is 1st to 6th grade, and then you have secondary school, which is 7th to 11th grade, and then you have A levels, which when I stopped, the rule was when I was in education, the rules changed that you had to stay in education till you was 18, which was BS, because basically they didn't want 16-year-olds earning on welfare to be unemployed or on welfare, because it makes them look bad, among other things. But I just went, as soon as I got to 6th, as soon as I finished 11th grade, for the Americans here, I just went straight to college, because that's the earliest age you could do. I mean, you could do a 14, one day in college, but ultimately I wasn't aware of that at the time, but I was happy. I got the grades I needed, went straight to college, started at level 3 national diploma. Then after 3 months, they're like, no, you're too good for level 3. We'll jump you up to level 4. So I'm now 3 months behind, and I got to do effectively 33% more work. And I finish, and I managed to get it all done the first in the group. So I was utterly screwed.
Well, the reason why I was asking, because I know some European nations, they are very particular about that, and I thought the UK had some sort of track system. We kind of do in high school. Basically, everyone goes through kindergarten through 12th grade, more or less the same, and then you can go to college. But you can graduate high school depending on the state, if you have enough credits early, or I think, 15 generally in most states, you can drop out of school and then you can get a GED, which is an equivalent to a high school diploma. But a high school diploma doesn't mean anything here in the United States anymore. A bachelor's degree is the new high school diploma. So, and it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's abysmal how bad the education system has become.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me laugh, because I finished with a national diploma NVQ level 4. So basically, it's the highest qualification I could get without needing to go to university. Because what really frustrated me was when I finished in 2011, if I were to go straight to university, which technically I had 2 options. One was to go through the standard comprehensive university system, which was literally not too far away from where I lived. It was actually right next door to my secondary school. I would have been in 36 grand's worth of debt. Or I was put in an interview, and I had what's known as I'm not sure if you guys have ever watched the show Dragon's Den, but one of the people at Dragon's Den who recently brought what's known as the Silverstone College, he personally came to the college because the college at the time had a reputation for producing greater students. And he spoke to the head tutor and said, right, who's your best student? And he called me out of the thing because I was basically helping another group partially build a Lotus Exige Cup car. We were making it a lot better. To put it in perspective, we took out the old Toyota Celica engine, put in a supercharged Honda motor, and made it wider, slick tires, and all that stuff.
Well, we do have technical schools here that people can go to for high school, but it's only the last 2 years of high school. Generally speaking, there might be some states that do that do it longer, but generally speaking, it's like you can go to a technical school and you can get like a culinary certificate or automotive, maybe welding, any of that kind of stuff. I personally think that, you know, I could come and meet you or anyone to the point that we should have primary school, elementary schools, we call it, for reading, writing, arithmetic, basic stuff. And then after that, maybe we should be focusing on, well, what kind of trade or what kind of life is this kid? Is this kid going to be someone like me who's more of a liberal arts minded person who can get a classical education? Or is this kid going to be probably a mechanic? You know? And don't get me wrong, I've been a blue collar guy my whole life, but if I would have put education first instead of girls and guns, you know, it might have been a little bit different for me. But or that or my art, because when I don't really do much art now, really at all. But you know, they could have said, well, this kid's got, you know, talent. You know, I had stuff in museums when I was a kid and whatever else. They could have said, this kid has talent. We're going to get him on this art track, and we're going to help him out be an artist, or see if he pursues that. We're going to encourage him. But you get to a point too, at least for me, as far as education and art, where you're just not getting any real instruction anymore. And the only way you're going to get that is if you shell out some really big bucks and you hopefully get to a really good art school. Because I mean, I've taken like a college painting class, and the guy absolutely taught us nothing, and he made us work in acrylics, and I could not get them to work. And I'm like, can I switch to oil? And he's like, you don't have to ask me to do anything. And I'm like, well, you told us that you don't want us working with oil paints, you know, so what do you mean I don't have to ask you? And then
it is pretty stupid. Like me, like, go back to what I'm saying, like, that was just what I did with the Lotus with the other group. That was just me doing extra curriculum work, okay, off my own back. I didn't have to do it, but I chose to do it because I wanted to. And trust me, by the time we were done with this Lotus Exige, it was pushing, 350 horsepower, and the car weighed like 850 kilos. So you do the maths. That is a very, very quick car. And trust me, I made sure that engine was built properly, because I was a right grease monkey when it came to engines. Because when it came to my engines exam, everyone had little Ford 4-cylinders from like an old Escort or Focus or whatever. Me, I had the Big Daddy. I had a 3-liter straight six from a Lexus GS300. Now, And you know what that engine also comes? Do you know what also uses that engine?
The Jeep Grand Cherokee.
No. If you're a car guy, you'll know this car. The A80 Toyota Supra.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the 2JZ. But this was a
no, I only said that because I know a guy that actually had a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and it did have a straight six. I'm sure it wasn't the same one, but
no, it would have been like a 4-liter GM straight six. Pretty good engines, but so we had to complete, because the exam was you had to completely strip it down to its block, clean it all up, put it back together again, and it had to fire up first time,
right?
Or else you straight failed.
Well, and that's kind of the thing about education that's changed. I know you guys were talking about this on Yiz's stream.
Yeah.
But if you notice, like, the more education has progressed in our society, the less people are actually able to do.
Yeah.
It's I don't really understand how to articulate it appropriately, but
basically, the more and more educated people. Well, this actually, funny enough, I hate to do more shilling of other channels, but it brings me on to a brilliant video that AA did on Joe Biden, Neil Kinnock, and social mobility.
Right.
which is the big lie on social mobility.
Mhm.
How, and we've quote unquote increased social mobility by sending nearly half our kids to universities, but instead all we did was effectively make them worse off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you. By the way, you can show any channel on our channel. Just don't show. Don't show Voldemort. Strictly no Voldemort.
Type in the chat who you specifically mean by Voldemort, because I've got two names in my head who you mean by Voldemort. But yes, but he brings the point, like, when you effectively create a fake set of elites, you end up indirectly he's Voldemort. Fucking hell, he's far too fat to be Voldemort. But anyway, but yes, but that's the whole point I have, so like when I had to do these things, you had to do it, and you had to do it properly. There was no compromise,
Right?
because we're basically told, look, if something goes up, your head is on the line. And this is where, like, I think I've said this to you two before, when it comes to the subject of experts, using that in major quotation marks, when it comes to the world of engineers, they're like the only group of people who I could say I trust with my life on. Because if anything goes wrong with them, their head's on the line.
Well, that brings up something that we were talking about with Yiz the other day. Because I have this thing I'm trying to work out in my brain, whereas how do we end up getting to the point now where the term, or the cast, I guess you should say, the cast of expert is, this, trust the, you hear this all the time, trust the experts. And we were kind of kicking the idea back and forth, and Yiz said something, well, back in, I forget exactly what example she used. Back in the day,
it's blacksmiths.
Blacksmith, or something like that. And I never thought about it in terms that when I say expert, people think I mean things like that. Like, for some people, expert seems to be people who can do stuff, and for me, a master beer maker or a master blacksmith or a master engineer isn't an expert. They're just someone who's really good at doing something. The expert are these people who you don't actually get to talk to. They're way up on the hill somewhere, who have complete control over your life, more or less complete control over your lives. And to bring it back to the concept of language we were talking about, that was a really big, like, light bulb for me. It's like, oh, when I've been saying this, people have been taking it completely different. But that just kind of jogged my memory.
Well, it's funny you mentioned language as well, because that brings me on to another word which isn't so much used now, but I remember it was used so much many, many years ago. The word epic.
Oh, yeah. Well, Ben Shapiro ruined that.
No. But, like, what frustrates me is what epic actually refers to. Now, epic is specifically a term referred to scale and grandness. So if I were to use epic in an actual real context, the God of War franchise is epic because of its scale and its size. Like, you're a little freaking 6-foot-ish tall human, and you're taking on giant statues.
Right.
You're literally climbing and taking on a titan, stuff like that. That's a sense of epic because of the grand scale of it. But but that's something I will say that makes me laugh when it comes to the so-called university types, and me being the so-called blue-collar college educated type, is that so many people do not know how to think, but also don't know how to solve a problem. And I'm just like, well, what I had to do, I had to not only think about what I had to do, but I had to also justify every action I made. Now, you two are going to laugh at this, right? Imagine this at college. You as like a 17 turn 18-year-old, you have to build a team to win the 24 hours of Le Mans. And you have to do this in a 100,000 word essay. And you have to justify, well, technically it was 50,000 minimum, but I did it in a 100,000 word essay because I like to because I went absolute overkill in detail. And I remember my teacher just read it. Like, he read it, like, it took him like a week to read it because I'd done loads of papers. And he called me and said, yes, it's like, right, so let me get this straight. You want to build a twin-turbo V12 car? Yes. That the engine's the size of a V8? Yes. With four-wheel drive? Yes. Four-wheel steering? Yes. Active aerodynamics? Yes. To weigh under 900 kilos? Yes. have a coefficient drag of no higher than 0.30. Sorry. Yes. And a load of other technical garbage. I'm just like, how much is that going to cost? I just turned around and said, about 5 million per car, give or take. It was like, Jesus Christ, that's going to cost that much to build a car? I was like, you didn't say anything about a budget. But that's like the ridiculous nature of it.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right. We don't have the ability to solve a lot of problems. We, you know, like I studied, like I said before, I studied international studies and history in college, and the international program was a joke. We had guys that came in to talk from the Foreign Service Office, and you know, these guys were basically just drawing a paycheck. They weren't solving any problems, because a lot of times when it comes to social problems, especially social problems that have multi ideological issues, you're not going to solve it the way you solve, you know, a car issue. You know,
I mean, a lot of people would say that, and I'm just like, hold on. No, but here's the problem is, I do find when people, when they have problems, they don't want to know, they don't want the problems answered. They want to have a philosophical type of why. They want to know the what, they want to know the why. And I'm just like, that's your problem. You're focusing too much on the why and less on the what. So, for example, that's why I jokingly say to people, I basically have my own type of meme here when I say to people, this is why I need to be in charge. Because there's a problem, I give a very clear, very concise way of how to fix it, and then the punchline is, this is why I need to be in charge. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be something utterly ridiculous, like how, like, I don't know, why Cyberpunk a buggy mess. It's like, well, it's very simple. You have you have proper good freaking quality assurance testers who test the living crap out of a game like 2 months before it goes release. And this is why I need to be in charge. Like, that's the whole joke. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like, well, why are kids so ill-disciplined? Simple, because you need to bring back the nuclear family with a vengeance.
Yeah, I real quick, just because I was talking to Lucifer here in the chat on D-Live. Interesting. I was stationed and lived around where I guess he grew up, but in any case, he was mentioning how horrible shop and stuff was when he was growing up. And that's the thing is, we had 3 years of like shop, technical drawing. Yeah. We had home ec, art. We would cycle through once a quarter, as well as gym every day when I was in middle school. And a lot of those programs have gone away. And again, for some people, that's all there was. And if you go further back, like into the 1970s, that was really common. Like, you could take shop all year long as an elective. But that's giving you basic skills to do things that we don't even care about anymore, because they want you to be doing this all the time. They want you to be separated from socializing, which is much of this great reset and using the COOF as an excuse and everything else. And I'm not sure that they want people to be educated at all or have any skills at all or know anything. You know, I've been watching a lot of stuff on butchery because I want to homestead and I want to be pretty familiar. I mean, I already do a lot of cooking anyways and all, and it's also cheaper. If you can buy a big thing of meat and butcher it yourself, it's way cheaper. And my wife was talking about, her stepbrother is a butcher, and she's like, he makes all kinds of money. And I'm like, oh yeah, I used to work with a guy who worked as a butcher part-time, and he made big bucks. I mean, because it's a skill. And right. And being a barista is not really much of a skill. And yet they will complain about not getting paid $15 an hour.
Well, yeah, but that's what makes me laugh with like a lot of those university students doing barista jobs. I'm just like, look, you're getting in, you know, as much as like 60 grand's worth of debt, and you're going to end up working a job where you're paying like half what I'm earning.
Yeah,
you know, who's the real chump right now?
It makes me wonder why this keeps happening. You know, I went into debt for my education, but not near that much. I went to community college for my first 2 years. But you know, this keeps happening. Like, you get this idea that not only do I need to go to university to learn something, but I need to go to a university halfway across the country and spend way more money than I could if I just went to university down the street. There's a lot of weird layers that stacks up into this, and I can't exactly make sense out of it.
I mean, the issue is sorry to interrupt. It's this sort of like mentality of you got to go to university to get a good paying job, and I'm just like, no, that's not actually true. I mean, perfect example in the United States, being a truck driver, like, unless I'm mistaken, or I was told lies, that's one of the most common jobs for non-university people to do, and they get paid good money despite how many there are. Like I've heard wages are something as much as like 80 grand a year.
Oh yeah,
for being a truck driver. And I'm just like, well, hey, yeah, it's not pleasant, but guess what? 80 grand a year, you could make as much as 80 grand a year. Hell yeah, but people don't like that because they like to. I've actually said this to lots of people. People like the idea of being wealthy. They just don't like the reality of being wealthy.
They also don't like the fact, as I was talking before we went on stream, that they're going to have to suffer to be wealthy. The tankies think that, that everyone who has any sort of wealth all own yachts, and they just got it from their daddy's money, and they don't understand it. Even people who are corporate folks or work on Wall Street are often working 10, 12-hour days. You know, for instance, my wife is currently, who works in a nonprofit, is currently helping to bolster up and grow this nonprofit because it's rather new, and it's been around for a few years, but she just got hired on the other year, and this is like part of her dream. She wants to grow this organization for this particular animal advocacy group. And it's not like crazy lefty animal advocacy. It's just trying to get rid of like unneeded lab experiments on animals that they've known for 50, 60, 70 years that just don't show any results. They don't yield any results. But she's been making them grow. And as we talk about this, her income's going to grow. She's about to get an intern. But she's working 10, 12-hour days sometimes. And that's who she is. She's like that. For me, I can be a hard worker, but not in front of a computer, man. Give me some physical labor. It's a whole nother thing. You know, I worked at FedEx for a couple months, and I busted my butt to the point where I about destroyed my knee. So, I mean,
I mean, my case, I mean, it's like with my job, I'm only paid to work 7.5 hours, nothing else. I mean, I used to do loads of overtime, but I'm like, nah, screw that, because ultimately I was basically twisting my employer's arm too much with getting extra and getting more overtime than I was technically due. Because I'm like, look, you want me to do overtime, you got to give me extra. And after a while, they agreed, but then they stopped doing it, and I was like, okay, fine.
But right now, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Right now, since I've now got properly secure employment, right now I just want to climb up that corporate ladder very, very quickly, and with current situations, there could be opportunity, but the problem is the corporate mentality likes to get in the way. And with the current situation, you can't stick with the corporate mentality because guess what? You're effectively taking too long. It's too slow. You need to be quick and active. And the problem is that the problem with the corporate mentality is they like to stick to structures that they've already pre-designed. I'm just like, look, if you stand still, you're going to end up falling behind and end up casting. You're going to be wiped out. I mean, yeah, it's a big corporation, but guess what? They could easily fall very quickly.
Well, the other issue that I think culturally seems to be an issue is, you know, we have a lot of parents, especially from like the boomer generation, that have this idea that if you end up working manual labor or you're working with your hands instead of your mind, that you're a failure. And I don't really know where this comes from either. Like it used to be, you hear people say, "Oh, you know, if you don't go to college, you're going to end up being a plumber." Plumbers do great. Like plumbing's a good job.
Exactly.
You got guys making, you know, 75,000 plumbing with no student debt, and you got guys, you know, going to school for, you know, whatever, basket weaving or whatever, you know, making nothing. Yeah. So there's obviously been some really shitty information passed on from generation to generation in the last 30 or 40 years. And we've got to figure out where that hang up is, because that's going to end up screwing us in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that people just don't know what people are getting paid.
for certain jobs. That's the reality of it.
Well, do you think, and I ask this because I really don't know, do you think that the types of people that get $65,000 in debt and then end up becoming a barista, do you think they'd ever be a plumber anyway?
Well, the problem is that most of the people I see in baristas are very much the, I guess you could say the more, I don't want to say a stereotype here, but sort of much more the artsy types.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say that too.
I think a lot of lefties try to pretend they're artsy types, and they're really not. Like they've never really created anything, you know.
Yeah, but like for instance, like for me, like when I was talking to college, like literally the whole thing about the low 6 each, literally a guy turned up, said to the tutor, "Look, if I pay you some money, could you do some work to my Lotus?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "Great," because I grew up, as I heard about it, I was like, "Oh yeah, I want to be in on that," even though I was in the group. I was like, "Yes, let me get my hands dirty on that." And literally, we sourced the bits, and literally the guy because I think how much did he get? If I'm trying to remember, I think he gave us like $5,000. You know, to build a car up, and literally we only spent $3,000 thanks to a little bit of wheelie dealing, to use an English phrase. We got, like I said, we got a Civic Type R engine, which from a breaker's yard, like that was a freaking steal and a half. How much we got for that? You know, we got our supercharger, got the air filter, freaking got it all running, purring like a kitten, widened the, changed the suspension geometry to make it wider. Obviously, nice wide sticky tires. We made new side skirts, rear bumper, the new front and rear bumper with the splitters and the spoilers and all that. It was just sick. And we only spent like $3,500 when the guy gave us $5,000. And by the time he was done, he drove it, gave us an extra money for the college, like an extra $2,500 on top. You know, and stuff like that. And I was just like, phew. And by the time I was done, I mean, we have this thing for UCAS points, which basically you have to earn so many points to get into a university. The most you could get normally was 360 points, and the university that I could have gone to was worth 320. I technically, on my record, had 400 UCAS points.
Right.
Because I did so much extra work, and I did all that, and I felt proud. But after I finished, I was so drained of the thing, I was just sick to death of it. Because I threw everything on it. I was basically like a drug addict, and I basically had to pull myself out of it to do it. And now I look back, I'm just think, yeah, it was a good time. But my God, I suffered big time for that. Like, I suffered hard work.
I was actually talking to someone recently, and I said if I could go back and do it over, because I did enjoy going to college. I studied history, and that's the only thing I've ever been like kind of good at. Even though it's that discipline is absolutely built on clay feet, but
right,
But if I had to do over, I could have spent less, probably a quarter as much as I did, and I could have went to college in China, got a degree, been fluent in Chinese when I left, and probably been better off really than going to the United States. And that's kind of what I've been telling people who, in my friends group who are thinking about going to college, who are like, because I went later. I didn't start college till I was 27.
I mean, I went in at 16.
Yeah.
Right.
So there you go. Yeah. So I've got some people that's thinking about, I'm thinking about, I want to get a degree. I want to go back to college. It's like, bro, go to college in like Nicaragua, like just completely bypass the United States and just go to like some third world country, get your degree and be done with it.
The problem is if you want to transfer that over, like this happens all the time where we get a lot of, imports from other nations, especially like India, who are doctors, and they already have their MDs from India, and then they have to come over here and do it all over again.
Yeah.
Require them. It's just stupid red tape that's in the way. And I get that there might be different technology that we have that they don't or whatever. But
the main thing is
generally speaking, man, internationally, everybody knows what's on point when it comes to like biology and medicine. It's pretty much international.
That's true, yeah.
So, but we require that of them, and it's just absolutely absurd. And that's the kind of stuff that it's the red tape. That's the stuff the universities do. That these institutions, administrations, the government does that keeps people actually from gaining wealth and having easier access. The certification, the credentialism here in the United States and most of the Western world, don't get me wrong, is just absurd. And, going back to the expert thing, if you know how to do something and you do it well, why do you need a certificate to say, look at me, I know how to do this? And so many of those people who have that certificate are absolute idiots.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I've medical doctors included, just absolute fools. Don't continue with the research. Don't look outside the box. I mean, don't even get me going on diet and what most doctors will teach you, because they'll freaking kill you if you listen to anything they have to say.
Well, yeah. I mean, just goes back to the point about the thing. Like, what we had to do, we had to demonstrate by hand that we could do it. And again, we were done by trained professionals, like people who work for British Aerospace, Renault F1, ProDrive, all those boys. These are people who've been there and done it. I mean, you mentioned ProDrive. Guess what? They won the World Rally Championship 3 times with Subaru, and they've won the 24 Hours Le Mans in the GT class with Aston Martin, and also helped Ford in Australia win the V8 supercars. These are people who know what they're talking about. Oh, I forgot, also helping Ford win the British touring cars in the 2000s. Renault F1. One of my tutors there were there when Fernando Alonso won his 2 titles. These are not, people who could easily wear a suit and pretend to be smart. No, they actually did it. And that's something you can't take away from people.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, the universities, like, I got a bachelor's degree in history, but at the end of the day, that's just a piece of paper. It doesn't say anything that I've accomplished other than I sit through a bunch of fucking classes.
You wrote some papers.
I wrote some papers, and it doesn't. Since Ted Kaczynski has been mentioned in the chat, I'll say it doesn't fulfill the power process, as Uncle Ted would say. But so it's it's kind of but that's what I was telling people to kind of go back, is that if all you're trying to do is get a piece of paper, if you're just trying to say, I got a bachelor's degree, I sat through that, I got the liberal arts education, bro, go to like Thailand and do it. You'll probably have more fun with it when it's over with, and you'll be a lot less in debt.
Oh yeah, for sure. But this goes back to my point there about what I studied. Is like, having to strip apart a 3-liter straight 6, which is dual head red can, clean it all up and put it back together again. And no joke, because we had the entire day to do this, which was an 8-hour day. I did it in 3 hours.
Wow.
Which anyone who's gone to a garage and said they need something done on the engine, that's pretty damn freaking quick. Because normally they'll charge like an entire weekend for that. I did it in 3 hours. And I remember going to my tutor. He was literally going to have his lunch. I was like, yeah, I finished. And he's like, what? It's 12 o'clock. What do you mean you're finished? I'm like, it's finished. Go fire it up. He's like, okay. Goes down, cranks on, turns it on, fires up first time, purrs like a kitten. I was like, well, you passed. And everyone else is still working away on their little 4 cylinders.
Well, that's the thing too, Kizza, because we continually dumb down the standards, where it's like we're gonna appease the lowest common denominator instead of raising the standard. We should be raising the standards over time, right?
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the main things we did at college was like, it was basically whoever was the best in the class. Literally, a couple of our teachers would go around and say, right, now go ahead and beat him. Like, effectively punked out a lot of the students within the class.
Well, that's good. I mean, for me, I always go back to when I was a young man and in the military, because I just fortunately had to be, my first unit was a very small unit. We had to have a ton of responsibility for what we were doing. Yeah. And so leadership was just like pounded into our head. And I just had this, I guess, natural inclination, or this thing that clicked in me naturally to, because I guess I at the time when I was young, I was a very highly integrous person. And so I really took those ideals to heart, and they've always stuck with me. And I see it time and time again, how there's just no leadership in the world. It's there is when businesses and stuff are trying to grow most often, but once they get corporatized, there tends to be about bottom lines and profits and stuff, and they tend to lose their way. And I think that's a calling back to why everything is better when it's decentralized. And that's another thing I learned in the Marine Corps was decentralization. Decentralized command is the best command. If you want to have strong societies, if you want to have strong organizations, you want to have strong industries, you want to have strong individuals, we have to decentralize things instead of looking to authorities, which basically at any point, any authority can become corrupted, could become the broken cog in the wheel that screws up the rest of the works.
Absolutely.
So we can't rely on that. If one person goes down, someone else has to be able to pick up that job. And we have a society that kind of encourages incompetence. That's really what socialism's about. We have this society where people just want to get by. And it's like, well, let me get this job. And I've known plenty of people like this. And this is the standard mode of thought. Let me get this job because I can retire in 20, 30 years or so. And then I can just live off of that retirement. And even if this is the worst job ever, I hate everything about it, and my life is horrible because of it, because it puts me in a bad mood all the time, doesn't matter, because I know that sometime in the future, when my youthful years are over, I'm going to be retired and I'm not going to have to worry about money, except for you didn't think about inflation and how stupid our governments are. So none of that's going to matter in the end. And then you're just going to rely on the government more. And this is why I'm so big on being self-sufficient, being independent. Obviously, I believe in the collective, and we should have collective certain responsibilities to our community, all that kind of stuff. But the collective shouldn't dictate like how we act and what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your point on leadership, it reminds me of a good thing when I used to play football or soccer for the Americans here. I remember when we played the games.
What you meant.
But this is Sunday League, right? And I remember we're playing a game. We're going with the standard formation 4-4-2, and I worked out literally within the first 3 minutes. Okay, they're set up in a 3-5-2, and we're getting exposed in the midfield. So I literally, on my own back, changed the entire team formation layout before the manager could to get control of the game, because that's something that you don't see a lot of the times. The manager dictates to the players, and they go about them, but you don't see players effectively going against the manager because they realize something is wrong from the point. And this is where I talk about this is a true sense of leadership, is that they can spot something, in a sense, go against the command in order to save the command, if that makes sense.
I've had to do that in the military a couple times where things were just, it wasn't good, and there's a great scene in the show Band of Brothers. Of course, it's based on a true account. The show is where they are supposed to go over and do this really dangerous mission, and they lost a bunch of people, and they were told to go do it again. And the commanding officer defied the orders and just said that they were going to do it and didn't. And that's what a true leader does. And I've actually had arguments with what I would call, the bootlickers, the types that are, aren't real leaders, that just do what they're told, and they might be in charge and command. Where they're like, no, you're supposed to do this or that. And it's like, no, actually, if you're a responsible leader, you do otherwise. And then if someone finds out about what happened, you don't throw your men under the bus. You take personal responsibility for your decision. I mean, we have the term to do that most of the time.
Well, yeah, we have the term over here, brown noses, and I despise the brown nose. I'm all in favor of throwing those type right under the bus. Because effectively, as far as I'm concerned, they're dead weight. But this is my point. Like, especially when we're doing college, like we had to build what's known as a GP midget, which is like the lowest class of the dirt ovals you're seeing across the state. So we didn't have to build a big dirt oval with massive wings and a big Chevy V8 in the back. We had we had to build like a tiny little, a smaller version with like a 1.4 liter engine. But me, I was I thought outside the box here, and I got the whole rule book because I was one of 3 leaders, and I was the youngest one at 18 years old. Most of the students were in like early 20s to as old as 27. And I had to look at the rule book because, we always check to see what the rule book says. Having a look through it, and I see, oh, what's this? It says it has to be a 1.4 liter engine, but it didn't specify it had to be a car engine. So I had a word with my other leader who lives in London. I told him, tell you what, mate, do you know of a good bike breakers yard? Which is like a scrap yard for like cars and bikes where they take apart parts and keep them on the shelf. It was like, yeah, why? It's like, suppose you could give them a ring to get a Suzuki Hayabusa engine by any chance, could you? It's like, oh, I like that. Like, he gave a call. Thankfully, they had one which they only got like 2 days prior to we called. A full engine and gearbox all running on the phone, and the guy only wanted £300 for it. I was like, sweet, take that. Got it into college, put that, and we obviously built the chassis because the guy who made the call, he was our chief designer, made the chassis itself. And one little ingenuity I did do, which was brilliant, when we did the cross members, instead of doing the traditional thing where you have one cross member in and then you cut the other one half and then weld it on together as two separate pieces, what we did was cut like a segment in at the middle of both the cross sections, so they'll be mated so they basically act like as one piece, weld it all together, so it made it structurally about what we worked out about 15% stronger because of that little tactile piece. And effectively we could have a stronger chassis while making it lighter.
Yeah,
I feel like this has turned into a gearhead show.
I know, right?
Yeah, well, sorry, yeah, I'm talking about my education here, but yes, we did all that. We built the boy puts it, ethically sourced Hayabusa. Well, it is a Suzuki. It is a very fast sports bike. So yeah, we thought, screw it. That engine's got like 200 horsepower from a 1.3 engine. Yeah, we had to convert it from fuel injected to carburetors, which wasn't too hard, thankfully.
Why'd you have to do that?
Because in the rules it says specifically it has to run on carburetors.
Oh, okay.
Because it's an old series. Because with fuel injection, you could just be on the computer and do stuff like that. Whereas a carb, you have to do everything a lot more manually speaking.
Okay.
So we had that, built our chassis, got our wheels and tires, suspension, all geometry all done. Great. We turn up to the race. We had our driver, and he basically utterly destroyed the competition because we effectively had like 50% more power than everyone else does, and we were about 10 kilos lighter than everyone. And then obviously a lot of the old boys are mad because we won, because we're the kids who beat up the old boys. And they turned around and tried saying, "Oh, that's illegal. You can't use a motorcycle engine." I was like, the officials came around. I was like, "Excuse me, sir, is this your official rule book?" "Yes." "Could you please tell me where it says we can't use a motorcycle engine?" He looked at like page 4, and he looked at it, and he's like, just shut in. He's like, "Nope, the car's legal." Just straight up said the car's legal, and we won.
Yeah.
But what was really funny, 48 hours later, I check on the rule books again. They updated it where it specifically said now you have to use a car engine.
You know,
Isn't
it's
it interesting how in a competition though they will follow the rule book, and when it comes to, let's say, governance or anything like that, like the rule book's kind of just thrown out all the time. You challenge it in court. It's like, well, the law does say this, but for the sake of the way, the government should have more power, we're just going to say, nah.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because it reminds me of something Moldbug said, which I have to trim it down. So, how do you tell when your government's corrupt? Well, kind of what Moldbug says is that your government's corrupt when the people in power actually aren't responsible if they fuck up. So you got so say for instance you've got someone like, I don't know, a mayor of a specific state who says we need to lock down and ruin everybody's lives because it's going to keep the virus from spreading, and then the virus spreads anyway. Well, then and then he doesn't get. I'll just redact what I'm going to say for Fed posting. You can tell that he's not being held liable for the decisions he made. So that's your metric for corruption. It just kind of reminded me of what you said. Whereas people in like a race or whatever, the officials, if they fuck something up, they're going to get fired. So that's how you can tell when the different kind of standards these guys are running on.
Well, the thing is, even in the likes of Formula One, there's been blatant signs of corruption.
For sure.
I mean, hell, at one point, the literal boss of the FIA was quite literally the son of the founder of British fascism, and I wish I was joking with that.
Oh wow!
Well, there's certainly within sports or competition, there's bad calls and other things, but I'm just saying generally, when people agree to the rules of something, and if it's a competition, whatever it might be, I mean, you always risk the human factor. There's always favoritism or something going on. But generally speaking, I do believe that when we compete in a way that's not very serious, everyone pays attention to the rules. Once it gets serious and real, it's like the rules are out the window.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting kind of phenomenon of human nature. Hey, real quick, as an aside, if you guys are following or watching the show right now and you haven't, give us a follow. If you're on D Live and you use YouTube, go over to YouTube at the Ends Justify the Memes. Give us a subscribe if you would, please. Don't forget to like, all that kind of stuff. It helps us. It helps us grow. We've only been doing this for a few months, and we're trying to grow. So I hate to have to shill ourselves, but
shill away.
Yeah. I mean, well, and again, it's like people watch, they jump in, they don't necessarily see. Yeah, see, I just got a follow from doing that. So,
hey, look at that! Look at that!
Right. But I mean, I do it too. I watch all kinds of channels, and they go,
yeah,
I'm watching like an hour in, and often I'm pretty good. And I'm like, oh, I like this. After like 10 minutes or something, I'm gonna give them a like or a follow or something. But I'm an hour in, and they'll be like, hey, please like us, and I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should. Because
I mean,
I'm not trying to compete with any other channel. I just want our channel to grow, and
exactly.
Yeah. So, anyways.
But going back to your point about rule books, right? Now, here's the thing. In the world of what I study, motorsport, you take the letter of the law. You don't take the spirit of the law. Mm-hmm. Now, those who study law will say that, especially in the UK, when you have stuff like common law and stuff like the spirit of the law, that's where the issue of interpretation comes in. Whereas what I found with speaking with those of someone, I remember speaking to a chap from Belgium, what he spoke about is when it came to law, you only took the letter of the law. There was no spirit of the law. Now, here's the issue is that when you get something that's very ambiguous, that's where things get very dodgy. That's where the whole interpretation comes up. Whereas me, I always take the letter of the law. It's like, what does it specifically state? Okay, it says this. Okay, then I just do something and somebody says, oh, you can't do that. And I just go, where does it say I can't do it? Like, show me where in writing it says I can't do that. I mean, hell, there's, like I said to somebody, when it comes to innovation, the three kings of innovation are Colin Chaplin, Roger Penske, and Henry Unick, aka Smokey Unick. Now, if you know NASCAR, you know all about the last name Smokey Unick.
That's a pretty old NASCAR name, though, right?
Oh, yeah, he's old, but I'll tell you this right now. He is responsible for so many of the rules in modern NASCAR.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I'll put it this way. If you want the idea of someone literally taking the mickey out of officials, he is the man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a guy who literally took the mickey out of officials. To the point where he will do something, and then literally the day after he's done something, they'll have to update the rules.
Right.
That's how much he was buying heads with the.
You know, it's funny you mentioned him because when it comes to NASCAR, having grown up in NASCAR country, Richard Petty is really he's the guy who they say like he really changed NASCAR because he brought in aerodynamics more or less. And he also had the what was the car, the Superbird, which was of course he was beating people by 9 laps and stuff. So
but the stuff that Smokey Unick was doing was crazy. Like, I'll give you a funny tale, right? They built their cars. I believe his was what was it? I believe it was a Trans Am. No, or was it a Camaro? One of the two. But specifically, the rules state everyone had to have a 40-liter tank. Okay, that's fine. But then they do the race and they notice Unick's car's going a lot further than everyone else does. Mm-hmm. So it was like, oh, what's going on here? They thought, did he have a second fuel tank? Well, because there's two stories with the fuel tank. Once, as a troll, he put a basketball inside the tank that when they filled up the tank, it will reach 40 liters. And then what he did was, after he did the inspection, deflate the basketball, take it out of the tank, and then fill it up properly. So he had naturally a bigger fuel tank than what the officials could check. Because ultimately, to check a fuel tank, you have to fill it up.
Right.
Ultimately, he did that rule, and they caught it onto him. Now, the second thing he did, he put in two. I'm trying to think. Oh, damn! How far was? I know he put in something like 20 meters worth of 2-inch thick pipes, fuel lines.
Mm-hmm.
and it had that much fuel in it that they took the fuel tank out of the car, and he could still drive off.
Oh wow!
Which sounds utterly hilarious when you hear it in context.
What decade was this? The 60s,
60s and 70s.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, like he just did like one of the funniest stories I did here. You would know this from NASCAR. You know that that sort of model thing that they do when they put over the car to make sure it's legal?
Yeah.
Well, he's the guy who invented that. Because he had a Trans Am back in the day that was heavily modified. And what he said to the official was, listen, I have this great model that you put over the car to prove that it's completely legal. It was like, an officials, because they know he's that type, say, okay, then, how are we supposed to know it's a legitimate car? It's like, okay, and how about we go to the car park and see if there's one?
Right.
What they didn't know is he turned up in a car identical to that car that was modified, didn't say it was his. He's like, oh, look, there's a car right here. Let's go mock it up. Puts the thing over the car, and it was like, okay, it's legal. And then ultimately does his racing, wins, and then the FI cotton on that he properly fooled them.
Right.
Which is why you have the thing now, because basically any part that goes outside of this I guess you could say a frame, was not legal. And it's just like he's responsible for so many of these rules.
NASCAR's weird because it's supposed to be stock car racing, and then the stock aspect of that went out the window decades ago.
Well, yeah, I mean the car today, like, there's literally nothing. I mean, hell, like, I know this for a fact. NASCAR didn't come away from carburetors until 2012, which is utterly hilarious because most things came off carburetors by the time the 90s came about.
Right.
And ultimately, and I do know this for a fact, McLaren actually supplied the ECUs for all of NASCAR.
Yeah, that's weird. I guess that kind of goes into what we're talking about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. At this point, NASCAR very much is about the spirit of stock cars and not about the letter of what a stock car is.
Well, yeah.
Sports evolve. It's like American football is a remnant of rugby, and essentially, as people were getting injured back in the day, getting hit hard, they started adding helmets and pads and all kinds of stuff. And now they're finding out that, well, that's actually worse because you get hit harder and people are getting more CTE because of it. Yeah, and whereas
it's the same issue with boxing gloves, right? Like once they introduced the glove, it's when it like really started going to shit.
You can't hit somebody in real life as hard as they hit with a boxing glove and a wrapped hand, by the way, or you'll explode your hand. In fact, I've seen it. I remember I had this big old boy in the jail. He was probably like 6'5" and 300 pounds, and he was lean. I mean, he was a lean guy, and completely like blew out his knuckles where they were like back here on his hand. And, cast it up and everything. And so he was on disciplinary segregation. That's basically you're in jail while you're in jail. And I remember getting him out to take him out for rec, get him in a shower and all that stuff. And I'm like, dude, what'd you do to blow out your hand? He's like, I went off and I cocked back like this, like this guy. And I said, dude, you're too freaking big to do all that. You got too much mass, man. You don't. I'm like, you could have went like this and probably knocked the dude out. You didn't need to cock your hand back,
Well, but I understand this. Oh, well, I do know this because my old man actually has done bare knuckle boxing.
Okay.
Against travelers, and trust me, that when they do bare knuckle, that's proper bare knuckle. And guess what? They don't necessarily, if they go for the face, they have to make sure they catch the cheek, because if they catch the chin, they're getting a broken hand out of it. But
a lot of the martial arts I've studied over the years have always been bare knuckle. I've almost never. I mean, we use MMA or boxing gloves for training. I'm not a big fan of using boxing gloves because they shield too much. But
at least MMA gloves, there isn't as much padding.
Yeah, and so there's like ways to hit with less force in a certain way. But you're right. You want to catch like the jawline, the cheek. Or you want to use like a hammer fist. There's very important ways, because otherwise, if you're like whack, you're gonna blow your knuckles out, man. It real easily. Or I usually teach when I used to teach people to strike and try and aim to hit behind the ear.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, the temple
hitting the
area, yeah.
jawline. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, just ask Dana White about that. He did that to Tyson Fury, and somehow he still got up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. Travelers, they're tough son of a bitches.
Oh yeah. I watched a documentary on that whole, bare knuckle boxing underground kind of thing. That I guess it's still going on. Yeah, there's some tough dudes.
I mean, there's the expression of there's the old saying that the Irish can fight. I'm like, yeah, because they do bare knuckle for fun.
Yeah,
Right.
Not just for
Yeah,
fun.
They use it to solve very common domestic disputes, like who's going to do the dishes. Well, we're going to fight about it.
I would say,
Yeah,
like in England, isn't it rather the same where like a fist fight's not that big of a deal? Generally speaking, like if people get in a fist fight, it's not that big a deal. Here in the States, unless you live in like an inner city or whatever, generally speaking, anymore, like if you get in a fist fight with somebody, both people are going to jail, and which is absurd to me. It's absolutely absurd. Like I get it; it can be very lethal and dangerous, but you're generally a mutual combative at that point, or there's an aggressor, and the aggressor, maybe you could make a case that he gets locked up, but
well, I mean, in that sense, sorry to interrupt. It's that if someone had a fist fight, two people have an argument, in a pub, and they take it outside and have a fist fight, they leave it at that.
Right.
But like having a random fist fight, let's say in the middle of a shopping center, is a big fat no-no. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, of course, but there's certain societal things that we must consider. A pub's a more appropriate place, and again, not inside the pub, but like you said, take it outside.
Yeah.
But here in the States, yeah, you could get away with it, but if the cops get called, both of you are getting locked up. I knew a guy who actually knew before I used to play poker with him, who got locked up, and of course, then I had to go, feed him and take care of him while he's in the jail. Who got jumped, or sorry, his cousin got jumped by like 3 black guys, and he beat the snot out of the 3 black guys to protect his cousin, and they locked him up, and he had to wait and rot in jail for 3 months before he went to court to be released, to say it was basically in self-defense of his cousin. It's stuff like that, which I find the police officers could have very well have let him go at the time. But there's a liability issue that the United States has created, where they're less reticent to do such things. And I'm not sure how it is everywhere, because it's certainly different. Like I believe Oregon still has, it's either Oregon or Washington State, still has mutual combative laws on the books. Pretty sure it's Oregon. And so basically, if you're like, oh, do you agree with me to have mutual combat? They're like, sure. As long as it's not like dueling combat where you're actually using like blades or guns or something.
Well, I mean, I have heard this apparently in a few European countries, you can do a quote unquote duel to the death, which is technically legal in a few European countries. But it's the fact that it hasn't been used in so long, people forget it's legal. Because I jokingly said to our friends regarding the whole European question, I would challenge Guy Verhofstadt to a duel to the death, because I understand that it's legal in Belgium to do that. And I jokingly said, right, let's do a duel to the death with swords, and let's play Duel of the Fates as a complete joke, to say, right, this duel will decide the fate of Britain and the European Union. If I win, I basically take the EU to town, but if I lose, Britain is taken to town by the EU. As a joke, and played Duel of the Fates, obviously from Star Wars Episode 1. I was joking. Somebody said to me, like, that's absolutely hilarious. Like, somebody who would dare say that would just be hilarious. Like, yeah, sure, I just turn up and say, right, oh, okay, Frost, I challenge you to a duel to the death. He's like, what? Yeah, I challenge you to a duel to the death. Here's your sword. Let's go.
Well, I think we've got sufficiently off topic, so maybe that's a good place to call it for today.
Yeah, I think Tank's got some stuff to go do. Yeah. I'm actually free today, but I'm sure my wife wouldn't mind if I did some housework.
No worries.
Yeah. But you will be back on with us next week, right, Kizza? You're still free?
Next Saturday I'm good, and the Saturday after that I am good as well. The Saturday after, well, that's the thing. I am due to go back on the 18th, but again, and I'll be on morning shift because honestly, I'm gonna hate getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, God.
Oh boy, I'm gonna hate getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning, but I should be good. Yes. I'm not sure if there's anything else I'd be doing between those times.
Well, you'll be on Yizza's show as usual, right?
Yeah, most likely. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys saw the big stream that happened on British Knights channel.
I had it queued up, man. I never ended up going back to watch it, but I remember you telling me about it.
I'll tell you what, though, we actually raised because I remember British Knight did a video on this. We raised between us and people watching. I believe it was like, I think it was over $300 for Cancer Research UK.
Oh, awesome.
Memory serves.
Good.
Yeah. So we did that, and there was like 20 of us all. Well, no, actually 20. It was like 10 of us all in the stream at the same time. So you imagine how that went. Yeah. So hopefully, yes. Next time I'll make sure to start writing up the so-called plan.
Yeah.
Shelling out about you.
The plan.
The plan.
Well, the first 3 times we had you on, we did talk about the plan, but as usual, we get off topic. Which,
yeah.
By the way, folks, don't blame me, even though this is my baby. Blame Tank because he's the one who was like, we should just keep it as an open topic show, and I mean, it works. We have plenty to talk about usually.
You can blame me. That's fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. But you got anything, Tank, to add in there, throw in there?
I'm doing a New Year's special on my OnlyFans. So it's $4.99. That's halved for the month, and it's all close-ups of my butthole. So
don't pay full price for that, folks.
Don't miss out on this opportunity.
And it's for a good cause. It's for Tank's streaming beer fund.
Yes, exactly. It goes to charity. It covers all the costs of my alcohol for this stream.
And his cigars.
Yeah.
Yeah, thankfully I don't smoke. Because I'm boring.
Guys, if I took a sabbatical this week, more or less, because I was fasting and wanted to do a media fast and all kinds of stuff. Just get away from things, refresh. But you can check me out on YouTube at all-1. I'm over there on Rumble. Do we have this up and running on Rumble? The ends justify the memes, Tank?
We do. I'm having to. So it's supposed to upload automatically, I thought, but I don't think it's working.
It doesn't work.
Okay, yeah. So I'm having to go back and do it. So when I get around to it, I will upload the streams. The back catalog is going to take a while, so sorry.
Just out of curiosity, how is Rumble, by the way? Because I've heard a few people going over there.
It's not bad. It just looks kind of cheap.
Yeah.
But
it works fine. I've been on it for a few weeks now.
Honestly, Odyssey looks way better, but it does. You can only have like 5-minute videos.
Yeah,
so it kind of ruins it.
You can have longer videos, dude. I have all my videos on there. Most of my stuff's like an hour long.
Yeah. Oh, I was trying to upload stuff. He was saying it can only be like 5 or 10 minutes. I don't know why. Maybe there's some other issue.
It might be a setting that you have to change. I don't know.
Yeah, because I've heard a few YouTubers going over there, and they found that they've gone over there because that's where they could vent out their so-called honest thoughts,
right?
Which are not terms of service friendly, as they would put it.
Right.
But yeah, I really should start writing up the plan, but I've just been busy with other stuff.
Yeah,
just enjoying my freedom. I've just been enjoying my freedom, so-called freedom away from work.
Right.
You know, and also to be fair, since I left education itself, I'm not good just sitting down and writing stuff up.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, I'm still. I also got a library going on, and I'm waiting for that to upload my back catalog because I have over 100 videos, even though I've only been doing this for like 6 months. It's I tend to produce a lot. I don't produce every week per se, but I tend to put out a lot of content. So that you can check me out, like I said, over on all-1. You have to type in all-1 channel on YouTube. And and then I'm on Rumble, like I said. I'm not uploaded my back catalog, but I've been uploading there every time I do a new video. We are here at the Ends Justify the Memes on YouTube live now, which we weren't doing originally. Also on D Live at ends_justify_memes. We will be back Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern with Matt Christensen. We screwed up our time last week. Both Matt and I basically miscommunicated, and we were supposed to have him last Monday. So we'll have that. We'll have our regular show Wednesday at 7 p.m. Every Wednesday at 7 p.m. we have our show regularly scheduled, and then we'll be back Saturday at 3 p.m. with Kizza. So hey guys, we thank you all for watching. Thank you for donating if anybody donated, and with all that, folks, this has been the Ends Justify the Memes, and remember, the ends always justify those memes. Play that outro, Tank.
I'm talking about all the way to the top, yeah. Unjustifiably in a position that I'd rather not be in, but the cream will rise to the top, oh yeah. Macho Madness, yeah, it's got more to offer than President Jack Tunney thinks that I got, yeah. And I'm gonna tell you something right now. Cards stacked against the Macho Man Randy Savage in WrestleMania 3. Yeah, let me say it, yeah. Let me say it out loud. And let me point to the president of the World Wrestling Federation. The Macho Man Randy Savage is not happy with your decision, yeah. I am the cream in the World Wrestling Federation.